It's funny how mental health is something that kind of touches all of us in one way or another.
Yeah.
Whether it's through our own experiences or even just people we know and care about.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so today, what we're going to be looking at is we've got this really interesting snippet from another podcast script, and it's all about raising awareness about mental health.
Right.
And one of the things that I found so interesting is that it kind of makes this really cool comparison between seeking help for your mental health versus seeking help for your physical health.
Oh, yeah. It makes a really good point with that.
Yeah, it does.
And one of the things that it emphasizes that I think is so important is that mental health is not just like this separate thing off to the side. It's part of everything.
Right.
It affects how we think, our feelings, how we act, even just our ability to deal with stress and everything else going on in life.
It's true. And it's like we all know that mental health is important, but this script really kind of drives that point home, that it's like so deeply woven into every part of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people kind of think about mental health as being something separate from physical health,
Right.
but it's not. It's all connected.
It all one big thing.
Yeah, and I think a good way to think about it is like, just like if you were to neglect your physical health,
Yeah.
eventually you're going to start seeing some consequences of that.
Right.
Well, same thing is true with mental health. If we ignore it, it can really lead to problems in our relationships, with our work, even just our overall, happiness in life.
I think it's interesting too how it, this script really brings up this idea that there's such a stigma around mental
Well,
health.
huge. Yeah.
And the script even poses this question like, why is there this difference in how we treat mental health versus how we treat physical health?
Yeah.
And I think that's such an interesting question to consider. Like, why is there that disconnect?
Well, I think part of it is because of that stigma that we've been talking about. It creates this fear of being judged
Oh, yeah.
and this shame that prevents people from getting help.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't really see with physical health. If you break your leg, you go to the doctor and you don't feel ashamed about it.
Yeah.
But with mental health, there's often this like invisible barrier that makes it so much harder to talk about and to seek help.
Yeah. And then this script makes this really interesting analogy. I thought it was so smart. It says, if you break a bone, you go to the doctor, no questions asked.
Right.
So why should it be any different when it comes to our mental health?
Right.
And I thought that was just like such a simple but powerful comparison.
Yeah, I think analogies like that are so helpful because they really help to break down that stigma
Yes.
by, showing that mental health conditions are just as real and just as treatable as physical illnesses.
Exactly. And they deserve just as much attention and care.
Exactly.
And I think this script really seems